The ferry terminal was still awake, but only barely. It breathed in short, tired bursts. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering like they might give up at any second. Metal benches lined the platform, cold and damp, as if they'd been sweating all night. The smell of salt hung in the air, mixed with oil and something older. Rust, maybe. Or time. I stepped through the sliding doors and felt the quiet close around me. My shoes echoed louder than they should have. Every sound felt too sharp, too clear. It was past midnight. The city had already turned its back. I hadn't planned to be here this late. The funeral had run long. People lingered, talking about small things, avoiding the larger ones. I left without saying goodbye to anyone. I needed motion, water, a crossing, something that moved forward when everything else felt stuck. The terminal was almost empty. A young couple stood near the far wall, heads close together, whispering. A man slept across 3 seats, his jacket pulled over his face. That was it. No crowd, no line, no rush. An old attendant stood by the ticket gate. He wore a faded uniform and a cap that looked older than the building. His back was bent, but his eyes were sharp. He watched me as I approached, like he had been waiting. I handed him my ticket. He didn't take it right away. "You know," he said, voice low and calm, "the last ferry is empty after midnight." He said it the way someone might mention the weather. No warning tone, no mystery, just a fact. I looked at him. "Empty how?" He finally took the ticket and stamped it. The sound was soft, but final. "Empty," he repeated. "That's just how it is." I wanted to ask more, but he had already turned away. He shuffled back to his chair, sat down, and closed his eyes. The conversation was over. The gate clicked open a few minutes later. A low chime echoed through the terminal. The young couple moved first, then me. The sleeping man didn't wake. Outside, the ferry waited at the dock. Its lights were on, glowing pale against the fog. The doors were open. The engine hummed, steady and patient. It looked ready in a way that felt wrong, like it had been waiting too long. I stepped onto the ramp. The metal grated under my feet. Water lapped below, dark and thick, swallowing the light instead of reflecting it. Inside, the ferry was clean. Too clean. The seats were lined up in perfect rows, blue vinyl, without a single tear. The floor shone faintly, as if it had just been washed. No trash, no bags, no forgotten cups, no people. The doors closed behind me with a soft hiss. The sound felt louder than it should have. The air inside was cold and tasted like salt and rust. I breathed it in and felt it settle in my chest. I chose a seat near the window. The vinyl was cool against my palms. When I sat, the cushion barely dipped, like it hadn't been used in a long time. The ferry shuddered, then began to move. Outside, the harbor lights blurred as the fog thickened. Buildings faded one by one, swallowed whole. The city pulled away faster than usual, too fast. It felt like the shore was retreating on purpose. I watched the water slide past the window. It was black, smooth, broken only by the wake. The hum of the engine filled the cabin, deep and even. No announcements, no voices. I checked my phone, no signal. The screen dimmed, then went dark. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a moment. Images from the funeral slipped in. The closed casket, the flowers that smelled too sweet, the sound of dirt hitting wood. I pushed them away. When I opened my eyes, something felt off. My reflection stared back at me from the window. Or almost stared. It was me, but delayed. When I moved my hand, the reflection followed a beat too late. When I blinked, the eyes in the glass stayed open just a second longer. I frowned and waved, slow and careful. The reflection copied me, but not exactly. The smile it tried to make didn't match mine. It pulled too wide, then dropped too fast. I looked away, heart picking up speed. Probably the glass, the light, the fog. I told myself that and didn't believe it. The ferry rocked gently. A soft creak came from somewhere behind me. I turned. The rows of seats stretched back, empty and neat. No movement, no sound. I faced the window again. The reflection had changed. There were other faces now. Faint, like smudges on glass. A woman's face hovered near my shoulder, eyes closed. A man's face flickered near the aisle, mouth open as if mid-word. I jerked back. The faces vanished. My breath came faster. I pressed my hand to the window. The glass was cold, solid, real. "This is stupid," I whispered. My voice sounded thin in the large cabin. The reflection returned to normal. Just me, pale, tired. The ferry continued forward. The fog outside thickened until there was nothing to see. No water, no sky, just white pressing in on all sides. Time felt strange, stretched, loose. I tried to focus on small things. The hum of the engine, the faint vibration under my feet, the smell of salt. Then I noticed the silence between sounds. It wasn't empty. It felt arranged, like someone had removed the wrong noises and left the rest in place. A faint scuff echoed from the far end of the cabin, the sound of a shoe brushing the floor. I held my breath and listened. Another sound followed, a soft shift, like someone settling into a seat. I stood slowly. My legs felt heavy like I was moving underwater. I walked down the aisle, each step careful. Row after row passed, empty, clean. At the very back I stopped. The seat cushions there were slightly indented, as if someone had just stood up. The air felt colder. My skin prickled. I turned back toward the front. The window reflections were gone now, just fog. The ferry's horn sounded once, low and long. It vibrated through my bones. Ahead, a faint glow appeared in the mist. Not the city, not a dock, just a pale light hanging still. I didn't know where we were going anymore. I went back to my seat and sat down. My hands trembled, so I folded them in my lap. The vinyl creaked under my weight, louder than before. The light grew closer. The engine slowed. As the ferry glided forward, I saw my reflection again. It moved with me this time, no delay. But the eyes looked tired in a way I didn't recognize, like they had seen something before me. Like they knew where we were headed. The ferry kept moving, steady and calm, carrying me away from the shore and towards something waiting in the fog. The water outside the ferry turned black, thicker than night. The wake formed behind us for a moment, then vanished, like it had never been there. No ripple stayed, no trail followed. It felt wrong watching motion erase itself. I checked my phone again. The screen stayed dark. No signal bars, no clock. I held the power button until my thumb hurt. Nothing. The phone felt like a dead weight in my hand, warm but useless. I slipped it back into my pocket. The engine hummed low and steady. It was the only sound that stayed. Time stopped behaving. I couldn't tell how long we had been moving. Minutes stretched thin, then snapped back into seconds. My body felt slow, but my thoughts ran ahead, then stalled. I shifted in my seat. The cushion beside me dipped. I froze. The vinyl creaked softly, as if someone had just sat down. I stared at the empty seat. It stayed empty. No shadow. No outline. Just the faint impression pressed into the cushion, slowly lifting, like weight being removed. My throat tightened. I swallowed and tried to breathe through my nose. "Get it together," I muttered. The air felt warmer near my neck. Not much, just enough to notice. Like breath. Like someone standing too close. I turned fast. Nothing. Rows of seats stared back, blue and clean. The aisle stretched long and straight. No movement. No people. I sat still, heart pounding, listening. A soft sound drifted through the cabin. A woman's voice. Low. Close. She whispered a name I almost recognized. I leaned forward, straining to hear. The name faded before I could catch it. The sound slipped away, leaving the hum of the engine behind. A cough followed. Small. Dry. The kind a child makes when trying not to be noticed. My hands curled into fists. "Hello?" I called, my voice cracking. No answer. Another sound echoed farther back. A dull thud, slow, heavy, like something being dragged across the floor. I stood again, legs stiff, and took a few steps down the aisle. The lights overhead flickered once, then steadied. The sound stopped. I reached the middle of the cabin. The air felt thicker here, pressing against my skin. My ears rang slightly, like after standing up too fast. The PA system crackled overhead. I jumped. A voice broke through the static. Flat, calm, genderless. Next stop, Chunwa Point. My stomach dropped. Chunwa Point had collapsed years ago. A landslide. I remembered the footage. Mud pouring down the hillside. Houses breaking apart. The news said no one survived. The speaker clicked off. I stood there, breathing hard, images flashing in my mind. Faces from the screen. People waving from balconies hours before the ground gave way. The PA crackled again. Next stop, Laiho Village. Fire! That one I remembered too. Old wooden homes packed tight. Flames moving faster than people could run. A school fundraiser canceled. A list of names scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Each announcement landed inside me like a bruise. Dull, deep, familiar. I didn't know why I remembered these places. I had never been to them. But the names stirred something heavy in my chest, like grief borrowed from someone else. The voice named another stop, then another. Places erased, roads cut off, towns swallowed by water or dirt or flame. I sank back into my seat. The ferry rocked gently, as if nodding along. I thought of people I had known. A neighbor who never came back from a night shift. A cousin who drowned during a storm. A man whose photo I had seen once in a paper, smiling next to a headline about a missing hiker. Faces drifted through my mind, out of order. Some I knew. Some I didn't. All unfinished. The hum of the engine changed slightly, lower now, slower. I felt the seat across from me dip, then the one behind, then another farther down the aisle. The ferry filled without filling. I didn't look. I couldn't. The air buzzed faintly, like a held breath. Grief pressed into the walls, a low vibration I felt in my bones. The PA system crackled again. This is your stop. The words were meant for someone else. I knew that. Still, my chest tightened. At the rear of the ferry, a door hissed open. Fog poured in, thick and cold. It rolled across the floor, swallowing the seats near the back. Beyond the door, there was nothing solid, just white and a faint shape, like the suggestion of land that might vanish if I stared too hard. No one moved. Then I felt it, a shift. Like a line forming, like people standing. Soft steps echoed toward the door. Not loud, not rushed, careful, patient. I finally turned. Shapes passed me, not bodies, not shadows, just a change in the air, a brush against my arm. A chill sliding past my face. I smelled smoke, wet earth, old rain. The steps stopped near the open door. The fog outside pulsed once, brighter then dimmer. A sound drifted back inside. A sigh. Long. Relieved. The door slid shut. The fog retreated. The air warmed again. The seats lifted one by one, returning to their untouched shape. The ferry moved on. I sat there shaking, hands pressed to my knees. My mind raced, trying to name what I had seen, what I had felt. Nothing fit. No one boards here by chance, the thought came, clear and cold. This ferry wasn't empty. It was full of endings that hadn't been carried anywhere else. The engine hummed deeper, steadier, like a heart settling into a slower beat. Ahead, the fog thinned just enough to reveal a dim glow, farther than before. Not closer to land, closer to something else. I leaned back and closed my eyes, not to rest, but because I was afraid of what I might see if I kept them open. The ferry didn't slow. Whatever waited ahead wasn't a place to arrive, it was a moment to face. The ferry slowed without warning, not enough to stop, just enough to change the sound. The hum of the engine dropped lower, deeper, like it had moved farther away from the surface of the world. I opened my eyes. Someone was sitting across from me. I knew this before I looked. I felt it in the way the air held still, in the way the seat in front of mine was no longer empty. The figure wasn't solid, not fully. The shape was there, clear in outline, but thin, like it had been drawn with air instead of flesh. The person sat upright, hands folded neatly in their lap, facing forward. I didn't move. As my eyes adjusted, I saw more of them. Row by row, the ferry had filled. They sat in order, every other seat taken, no crowding, no leaning. Each figure faced the front, back straight, hands folded, feet flat on the floor. Like passengers waiting for instructions that hadn't been given yet. Their faces were pale, soft around the edges, as if the light refused to settle on them. Some looked young, some old. All of them carried the same expression, not fear, not anger, just tiredness. A deep, familiar kind of tired, the kind that comes from explaining yourself too many times, from asking for help and not being heard, from waiting until waiting becomes the only thing left. I swallowed hard. My mouth felt dry. No one spoke. The ferry moved forward, steady and calm, as if this was how it always traveled. One man sat 2 rows ahead on the aisle. His coat looked heavy, like it had been soaked once and never dried right. He turned his head slowly, carefully, like the movement cost him something. His eyes met mine. They reflected light that wasn't in the cabin. Warm points, yellow and distant, harbor lights, from a time before this crossing. "Do you have the time?" he asked. His voice was clear, polite, almost gentle. The question hit me harder than anything else had. I glanced down at my wrist. The watch face was dark, the hands frozen, one slightly bent like it had been stopped by force. I hadn't noticed before. I must have checked it a dozen times without really seeing it. My voice caught. It stopped. The man nodded as if that made sense. "That happens," he said, and turned back to face forward. Something inside me gave way. Images rushed in, uninvited. A phone buzzing on a table, ignored. A message read and not answered. A door left unopened because it felt easier to stay where I was. A night I told myself I would call tomorrow. Tomorrow that never came. The ferry windows changed. I didn't notice it all at once. Just a shift in color, in movement. The black water outside faded, replaced by bright white light. A hospital hallway slid into view. The camera-like glass showed long floors, polished and cold, lined with doors half open. Machines beeped somewhere far away. A figure lay on a bed at the end of the hall, small and still. I stood up without realizing it. "That's not," I whispered. The scene changed. Water filled the window next, not the sea. Brown, rushing water pouring down a stairwell. Handrails rattled. A shoe floated past, bumping gently against the wall. Another shift. A kitchen at night. A phone on the counter. It rang once, twice. The caller ID glowed, then dimmed. The ringing went on, unanswered, until it faded into nothing. I pressed my hand against the glass. The window was cold, solid. The scenes kept playing. They weren't memories in order. They weren't all mine. Some felt close, some distant. All of them carried the same weight, unfinished. I turned back to the cabin. The passengers sat quietly, watching the front of the ferry. None of them reacted to the images. This wasn't new to them. One woman sat near the window, fingers laced together so tightly her hands shook. Her hair was pulled back, neat, like she had done it for work. Her face held the strain of someone who had repeated the same truth until it sounded wrong. A young boy swung his feet slightly above the floor. His shoes were wet. He stared at the back of the seat ahead of him, blinking slowly. An older man's hands were stained dark, like oil or ink. He rubbed his thumb against his palm over and over, a habit that hadn't followed him here on purpose. I knew them, not by name, by feeling. They were the people who didn't make the paper big enough. The ones whose stories were cut short, smoothed over, forgotten once the noise passed. They weren't random, they were connected. To me. The realization settled slowly, heavy and cold. Each face pulled at something inside my chest. A shared silence. A moment I chose not to ask questions. A time I accepted an answer that felt wrong because pushing back would have taken effort. I thought of a man who worked in the same building as me years ago. Quiet. Kept to himself. One morning his desk was empty. Someone said he moved away. Later I saw a small article online. An accident. No details. I had scrolled past it. The ferry hummed lower again. The lights overhead dimmed slightly, not enough to go dark, just enough to soften the edges of everything. The PA system did not speak this time. I felt the motion change, not stopping, slowing in a way that felt final. The man who had asked for the time shifted in his seat. He didn't look at me, but I felt the question hanging there anyway. I sat back down, knees weak. "I'm sorry," I said, though I didn't know who I was saying it to. No one answered. The window showed one last scene, a room I recognized, my own living room years ago, the couch pushed against the wall. Rain tapping against the window, someone standing near the door, waiting, me, younger, distracted, glancing at my phone instead of up. The image froze, then faded. The water returned, black, still. The ferry's hum deepened again, steady and slow, like it was preparing itself. The passenger sat straighter, hands folded, eyes forward. Whatever stop lay ahead was close now. I understood with a quiet certainty that this was the last chance to listen, and that once we arrived, silence would no longer protect me. The fog closed in until there was no edge to it, no sky, no water, just a soft white pressing against the windows from every side. The ferry felt suspended, like it had been lifted and held in place by unseen hands. The engine slowed. The hum dropped lower, then softer, until it stopped completely. Silence spread through the cabin, thick and heavy. It pressed against my ears until I noticed my own breathing again. Slow, shaky. Ahead of us, beyond the glass, a pale glow waited. It wasn't bright enough to be light. It didn't move like a shoreline. It hovered, steady and distant, like dawn that refused to arrive. There was no dock, no pier lights, no ropes. Nothing to tie us to the world I knew. The ferry didn't rock anymore. It rested in stillness. One by one, the passengers stood. Not rushed, not confused. They rose together, smooth and quiet, as if they had practiced this moment. Their outlines sharpened as they moved, edges growing clearer, more defined. Bases that had been soft before now held detail, lines around eyes, set mouths, expressions shaped by long-held truths. They turned toward me. The air shifted. It felt full, crowded, though no one stepped closer. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady. My heart beat hard in my chest, each thud loud in the silence. I understood then what this place was. Not a stop, not a crossing. A pause, a moment held open, waiting for something that hadn't happened yet. Their stories pressed forward without words. I felt them instead, heavy, layered, overlapping. Fear that had been dismissed, pain that had been explained away, warnings spoken too softly, too early, to people who didn't want to hear them. They didn't want comfort. They wanted to be seen. The glow ahead pulsed faintly once, like a breath being taken. A space opened near the front of the ferry. Not a door, not exactly. Just a thinning of fog, a place where the white gave way to something deeper. I stepped forward. The deck tilted under my foot. I grabbed a seat back, heart jumping into my throat. The floor slanted downward, just enough to show what waited below. The sea. Not water as I knew it. It was darker, deeper, stretching far beneath the ferry. Its surface was crowded with reflections, faces, hundreds of them. They floated just below the surface, pale and distorted, eyes open. When I focused on one, it sharpened. A woman with tired eyes, a man with a crooked smile, a boy with wet hair stuck to his forehead. I recognized some. Others felt familiar without being known. I whispered a name. The face I was looking at sank. It slipped downward, fading into the dark until it was gone. I gasped and pulled back. The message was clear. Naming carried weight. Remembering was not passive. Each name claimed something. Each truth spoken changed what could stay afloat. The ferry existed because forgetting was easier. Because cities moved forward without looking back. Because streets were rebuilt, buildings replaced, headlines buried under newer ones. Shadows left behind because carrying them slowed things down. The old attendant's voice returned to me, calm and flat. Empty after midnight. Empty didn't mean vacant. It meant unclaimed. These stories had no witness, no one willing to carry them across. That was the cost. The glow ahead brightened slightly, and the space beyond it widened. I felt the pull, gentle but firm, like a current urging me forward. If I stepped through, I would leave this place. I would go back alone, but I wouldn't be empty. The passengers watched me, waiting. The man who had asked for the time met my eyes again. His gaze was steady, expectant. I shook my head. "I can't carry all of you," I said. My voice echoed softly, thin against the fog. "You don't have to," the feeling answered. "Not all, just enough." My chest tightened. The weight pressed down harder now, like gravity had shifted. My knees bent slightly and I had to steady myself. "Tell them," I whispered. "Tell me what to say." They didn't speak. Instead, images flooded me. A report ignored because it caused trouble. A complaint laughed off. A warning buried in paperwork. A family told to wait, to be patient, to move on. Lives reduced to footnotes. I saw myself again in different moments, choosing quiet, choosing ease, choosing not to ask why. My throat burned. "I remember," I said louder this time. "I remember you." The sea below churned slightly. Reflections shifted, rising closer to the surface. "I remember what happened," I continued, voice shaking. "I remember that you tried, that you asked for help, that you weren't lying." The deck tilted further. My feet slid. Panic surged, sharp and cold. I dropped to my knees, gripping the floor as the weight pulled harder, trying to take me with them. Hands reached out, not grabbing, steadying. The passengers stood closer now, their outlines clear, their faces human and worn. This was the risk. To witness was to feel the pull. To speak was to be changed. "I'll carry it," I gasped. "I'll say it out loud. I won't look away." The weight eased slightly. Enough for me to breathe. The glow ahead expanded, warming the fog around it. The space beyond looked thinner now, closer to the world I knew. One by one, the passengers stepped back. Their forms softened again, edges blurring, but their faces held relief. Not peace, not joy, release. The man nodded once. The woman near the window unclenched her hands. The boy's feet touched the floor. The sea below stilled. The reflections drifted farther down, not sinking this time, but resting, waiting. The deck leveled. The ferry shuddered gently as the engine hummed back to life. The glow ahead dimmed, pulling away, fading into fog. I stayed where I was, kneeling, breathing hard, soaked in sweat and cold. The ferry moved forward. Behind me, the cabin was quiet again, not empty, but lighter. I knew then that I would not leave unchanged, and that the crossing back would carry more weight than the one that brought me here. Morning arrived without warning. Light poured through the ferry windows all at once, sharp and pale, like a switch had been flipped. The fog thinned, then vanished. The black water outside turned gray, then blue. The engine hummed at a normal pitch again, steady and familiar. I blinked, my eyes burning. The ferry slowed. This time, it felt right. A pier appeared alongside us, concrete, chipped at the edges, exactly where it was supposed to be. Yellow lines marked the ground. A vending machine stood near the gate. A sign with peeling paint welcomed passengers back. The door slid open. People boarded. They came in groups and singles, holding paper cups and phones. Some wore headphones, others scrolled with their heads down, thumbs moving fast. A man laughed at something on his screen. A woman adjusted her bag and sighed. No one looked around. No one hesitated. I stayed seated for a moment, watching them pass through me like I wasn't there. My hands rested on my knees. They were still shaking, just slightly. The cabin smelled different now. Coffee. Soap. Damp jackets. Normal things. I stood and stepped into the aisle. My legs felt sore, like I'd walked a long distance without realizing it. As I moved toward the door, I glanced at the seats. They were empty. Truly empty. No outlines, no weight, no impressions left behind. Still, the air carried something faint. Salt. Rust. A trace of cold that clung to my skin. I stepped onto the pier. The ground felt solid under my shoes. Too solid. Like it needed to remind me it was real. The sun hovered low over the water, bright and clean. The city rose behind me, waking up. Buses hissed as they stopped. Someone called out to a friend across the street. Life moved forward. I walked away from the ferry terminal slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last, like something unseen was packed into my chest. An ache settled there. Not pain. Something earned. At home, I showered until the water ran cold. Salt slid down the drain. Still, my skin felt tight like it had dried in sea air. I stood under the spray longer than needed, letting the sound fill my head. Names stayed with me. They pressed against my throat when I tried to swallow. They sat behind my teeth when I opened my mouth. I didn't speak them yet. Not out loud. The day passed in pieces. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing. I watched light crawl across the wall. I ignored my phone when it buzzed. That night, I opened my laptop. I wrote a short message first, just a few lines, careful words, an apology that didn't ask for forgiveness. I sent it, then another, then one more. In the days that followed, I kept going. I filed a report I had once decided wasn't worth the trouble. I sent an email asking questions that made people uncomfortable. I corrected a story someone told too casually, smoothing over too much. Sometimes the room felt heavier when I spoke. Sometimes people looked away. I didn't stop. The ache stayed with me. It didn't fade, but it shifted. It made room for breath. Some nights I went back to the terminal. I didn't always know why. My feet just carried me there. I stood near the gate and watched the last ferry of the night pull away. Its lights glowed against the dark water, then dimmed as it moved into fog. Empty after midnight, no bodies boarded. Still, I felt it pass. The meaning, the weight, the crossing didn't belong to one place. It happened wherever stories were buried, wherever silence felt easier than listening, wherever someone chose not to ask what came next. I understood that now. The ferry wasn't the horror. The agreement was the quiet nods, the shared shrugs, the way people moved on because stopping felt too hard. I stayed until the terminal lights flickered down to their night setting. Then I turned and walked home. The sky was lighter by then. The city stretched awake, unaware and unchanged. As I walked, the ache in my chest shifted again. It settled into something I could carry, not closure, responsibility, memory. A wound, fragile and necessary, held open just enough to remind me why I couldn't look away anymore. The light climbed higher, and I walked on, keeping pace with it, knowing the crossing would follow me wherever I went.